got it.
Okay, so now... I told you I put lube on it.
Yeah, I forgot.
Ouch! When you're messing with PV lines, make sure it's disconnected at both ends, the panel and the inverter. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So it's finally time that I actually try and get this external DIY combiner box all wired up. It's probably been, I don't know, a couple of months since I showed you the pre-built combiner that I have on the side of the coupe. I actually got this box all mounted up last fall. I picked it up from Vivor. I believe this is a 20 by 20 by 6 inch externally rated enclosure. And I mounted it with some unistrut, basically the same way that I ended up doing it with the other combiner box. But it's been sitting here on the wall for several months now. And I need to work on finishing running my lines over. It'll come down and come into the bottom of the box here. And then this will have to get replaced and extended to come up to the bottom as well. But it's fun to be able to get back to the projects that I need to do in order to be able to grow my system to take my home further and further off grid. So let's get started. So first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to open this thing up. There is a backer plate that we can take inside to be able to build out our layout of how we're going to put this whole thing together. And this plate, I mean, is actually 18 1/4 by 17 3/4, and it's 16th inch thick steel, I would imagine. It does have little markers on the side to help you line up whatever you're going to mount to this plate. And I'm looking to mount a handful of these taxi 25 amp breakers, double pole. And then I'm going to use these Dinkel DIN rail connectors. They just seem to really simplify your wiring in here and give you the ability to easily split or parallel different lines together. And I'll be completely honest, I actually got this whole design idea from watching projects with Everyday Dave. So Dave, thanks for showing your installation and sharing ideas. And if you're not familiar with the Dinkel DIN rail, it's really just a very simplistic, think of it like a wire nut to combine multiple wires together. So if you flip it over to this side, you have the specs for it. 1000 volt rated, 60 amps, can take 20 gauge up to 6 gauge wire. And on this side, it's very simple. You have 2 screw terminals, one on either side, and then you have a joining bar in the middle. So whatever you feed into this side is going to be joined to this side. And on the bottom, they have just little feet and hooks, which allow it to curl and hook and then snap right into the DIN rail. And then this design gives you the ability to easily hook and snap multiples together, having a whole row of these. But not only does it just make it a very clean and easy design from a pass-through standpoint, but it also gives you the ability to bridge the 2 connections together. So if I have one line coming into this right-hand side DIN rail, passing through on the output side, I can put one of these in, push it all the way down, and now it physically bonds and bridges all of these together. So you could use this to either parallel your PV lines, or you could use it to bring your input of your PV into one side and have an SPD connected to the other side. I actually plan on doing that. I just apparently don't have SPDs yet. I thought I had all my parts, but I don't. So I'll just have to add those later. But that's the beauty of this, because I can come through later. Oh, I want to add something else. Okay, add another DIN rail connector. There we go. And you just keep going with as many DIN rails as you want, all limited by the space and the number of DIN rails that you've got. They also have green grounding DIN rails, which actually have teeth up here, and the teeth bite right into the DIN rail. And then they bond this to the DIN rail, and then your screw from here bonds to your plate, so you can have a good, complete grounding system by using these grounding Dinkel connectors. So my placement right now is looking to be about 2 1/4 from the outside edge, which will give me plenty of room if I want to run cables up the side. And then I've got 4 1/4 inches from the top of this plate. And then I believe there's also still even a little more space inside the cabinet once this gets mounted. So I should have plenty of room around the outside. And then I'm looking to give myself about 5 inches between the bottom of these breakers and the top of these DIN rails. And again, I'm about 2 1/4 inches in, so giving myself plenty of space without having to cram in multiples. It's going to look something like that. Now these DIN rails on the bottom, they do end up biting down, and they're pretty snug, so they're not going to slide. But they do give you these light brown or light gray, depending on how you're looking at it. They're basically end caps that will slide onto the end of the DIN rail and basically fix everything in place to keep them from moving. I'm actually going to put those up here on the top for the breakers, because the breakers want to slide a little more. And then I will add my grounding connector up here as well. So that should just give me plenty of room. It'll give me room for expansion this way, but it'll also give me the ability to bring cables up this way, have some excess cable here, bring it around the top. And I know that I'm going to need another bus bar once I get those 4 SPDs, so we'll end up lengthening that out as well. I'll need some more Dinkel DIN rail connectors as well for those SPDs, just so that I can bridge the connectors and run them over to the SPD. So the next thing we'll do, we'll make our little pigtail loops coming from the bottom of the breaker, coming to the Dinkel DIN rails. And that's where it's nice to have the hoarder mentality of, well, don't throw it away, because you never know if you're going to use it again. Because all these are filled with old wiring snippets and stuff. So I'll be able to use some of these to make my connections right here. So I ended up going through and cutting some of my existing wires that I already had to approximate length. And again, so negative will be on the left, positive will be on the right. So it should be nice and simple. I will have to trim a little bit, it looks like. I did put ferrules on the end, just so I know I'll get a nice, good bite. So we'll take the wire, wrap it up, and bring it down into the top of the Dinkel DIN rail connector. And I will go through and snuggle these up later. But you get the idea of how it's going to look. Positive, negative, positive, negative. This is where having those clamps would help, just to keep your lines from moving around too much. But I am using a ratcheting crimper and a miscellaneous ferrule kit in order to crimp. These are 10 gauge lines, so I'm using the 10 gauge ferrule, crimping under the ends. So if I take scrap wire, it's as simple as trim some off the end, pull out your proper size ferrule, get it right to the end, and give it a good crimp. You see that? There you go. Nice, good crimp. And then we have to just trim a hair off the end so that it fits all the way inside. Tighten down, rinse and repeat. Then we just got to do it the last 5 times. And I will leave links for the crimper and the ferrules down in the description if anybody is interested. All right, there we go. Not super pretty, but try to get all our negatives looped underneath and our positives looped on top. I'll snug down up here and all along here. So I still have to get the extended DIN rail for the SPDs. Probably get some more Dinkle DIN rails for down here, as well as just some end caps just to hold it all together. These wires are trying to pull just a little bit, but it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once I get those extra pieces, add those on, we'll add our grounding and everything to that. And then really we could take this entire thing, put it back outside, inside the combiner box, and our PV lines come into the top, and our lines to the house come out the bottom. Well, finally, after many, many hours of trying to figure out the best layout that I can have, I eventually ended up just stopping recording because I kept changing things. I would have it laid out one way. I'd even wire it all up and have it looking the way I would think I would look to, and then I'd let it sit for a little while, come back, and I thought of a different scenario that would require me to change how I had things laid out. So I'd have to unwire it all and do it all over again. So I probably ended up doing that maybe 2 or 3 times. I mean, oh my goodness. You never would think that it would take this much thought just to put some breakers and some terminals on some DIN rails. But it does. And that's kind of one of those things that you really need to take into account when you decide, am I going to build this myself, or am I just going to buy a prepackaged one? And ultimately, this is the layout that I ended up finalizing on. Will it stay like this permanently? Probably not. It might end up changing so that I ended up adding more across the top and then move some of these ground connectors down lower. I don't know. But this is what I've got for right now. So inside this box, we've got 4 studs that this back plate actually mounts on. And so I'm just going to come in from the top and set it on the bottom ones to start. And then just lean it back and put the flange nuts in the top corners, and we'll tighten this down in a little bit. And if you hear any drill noise, it's actually my wife working in the coop. She just got some more chicks, so she's putting up some roosting bars. But so here's what we've got so far. So I've got 4 Chitoxi 25 amp 1000 volt DC rated breakers. And then we have 4, and I didn't even know these did this thing, but they come out so we can actually flip it around. And then we've got 4 double pole 1000 volt DC rated surge protection devices. Inrush, it looks like 20,000 amps. IMAX is 40,000 amps. And then, like I said, I didn't even know these things came out, but they do. And so if they actually blow due to a surge, you can just replace these, which was kind of neat. And so you'll see green means that they're good and usable, and then I'm assuming they'll probably change to red if they actually blow. So we've got these side by side. This breaker and this surge protection device will go for 1 string, string 2, string 3, string 4. I have these upside down so that I can parallel I know I could combine into a single ferrule if I wanted to, but it's just, I don't like that. It seems like you could easily create heat that way. So I'm using these Dinkel-Din rails so that I can easily combine my different strings together. And so we'll end up paralleling every 2 sets. But by the time we get done, that's how it's going to end up looking. We've got our grounds coming to this ground bar, which then bonds to the plate. And then I'll have my main grounds coming into this ground bar here. I wanted to give something a little more solid for the main grounds coming in. I know I could have come up to the bottom here, but I think it would have potentially run out of connections. And I had the space, so I figured I'd just throw a ground bar in here. So hopefully figuring out all this was, really the hard part. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to start working on, just cutting the conduit and running the conduit for the new lines. And hopefully there'll still be some daylight by the time I get done. It's about 5:30 right now in the evening. And I did let the batteries charge up fully all day long, which was really a good feeling, because then I can take the PV offline for the rest of the evening while I'm working on running these lines. And while I'm pulling some of this wire out of here, over the weekend, Ian and I did end up running, was it 3 more sets of wiring through our underground conduit over to the house. So that will give me plenty of room for growth.
How much more is left? I got it.
Okay, so now... I told you I put lube on it.
Yeah, I forgot.
It's all slimy.
It's yellow.
Yep. All right, we need about 20 feet on your end. I know I have use for one of those lines right now. And that's what I'm pulling out right now. So all these lines here were ones that we ran over the weekend. And so now it's, my last few lines that I got to pull out, cut this thing out, put a new one in, run it over and up. It's nice this bottom plate does come off so I can actually pull this off, punch my holes for my fittings, and then line everything up with that hole already drilled in. And there's a waterproof gasket on there as well. So as long as I stay in the middle, it should be fine. So we'll be using our hydraulic knockout kit, but we need to get it started, so we'll use these step bits just to get the initial hole drilled. Ouch! Remember how I had said hot slag? Don't use flip-flops. I know some are going to ask why I didn't just keep going with the step bit. Because this just doesn't throw slag everywhere. And it's inevitable that when I'm doing this, it's hot outside. So I'm in flip-flops or bare feet. So I'll use the small die to get things started and make the hole large enough for the big die. There we go. 2 entrances into the bottom of the box. All right, so we've got the one conduit in, comes up from down there, swoops over, and then comes up, and then this will be the main feed that goes back to the house. We interrupt your programming for this special broadcast announcement. Just kind of a reminder, when you're messing with PV lines, make sure it's disconnected at both ends, the panel and the inverter. Oh, yeah. I don't know which one it was, but I touched it. And it's not the panel side, it's coming from the inverter side. I got a good little zap. Yikes. All right, so I've already landed the ground line that goes back into the house, as well as my new array lines that go back into the house, because I knew which ones those were. And I know that with those new lines, I need to be able to push back into the house as much as I can, because I'm a little short on the inside. So if I can give myself a service loop in here for any adjustments I need to do later, and then be able to pull the rest back into the house, that's going to save me a lot. I don't recall seeing a torque spec on a lot of these, so I'm just using 1.5 Newton meters. If I can find an actual torque value that I completely missed, I'll use those, but for the time being I haven't found them. And before I forget, I do need to push these things in, because my luck, I'm going to actually forget about them. I don't remember what the current rating is on these. I want to say it's like 30 amps. But yeah, let's move these over. So every pair goes to one array. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to move these to array 3. And then everything needs ferrules on it for good connections. Love this thing. Only thing that would make it better is if it ratcheted. But then you'd probably mess up your torque thing. I don't know. But yeah, very nice tool. Number 1 will end up being my barn roof. Number 2 will be coop roof 1, coop roof 2, and then a spare. So now we just have to bring the PV lines up and into the tops of these breakers, and then we can test things. It is about 9 o'clock. There's a couple pieces missing that I'm gonna have to pick up tomorrow in order to properly finish this. But what I'm probably gonna do, camera's at 4%, I'm gonna just try to temporarily wire up some of these circuits so that I can have some solar tomorrow. And then tomorrow evening, I'll run out to the store, pick up my pieces, and then try and get this all wrapped up. So, till tomorrow. So it is a new day, and unfortunately, it's actually a couple of days after the last clip that you saw where my camera battery was dying. I was working on getting everything ready last night for all this, the final preparations to get everything taken care of. And we ended up having some severe weather incoming. And so Ian and I kind of just worked hard and fast to try and get things somewhat plumbed up and taken care of. I didn't mess with the camera at all. If you've done any YouTube videos before, you know that trying to record what you're doing is always going to add a lot of time to that project. So we really just tried to get it all done before the storm and the rain came in. And so let me show you where we're at. It's not 100% done yet. I still have some things that now that I see it, I need to tweak it a little bit and make a few changes, but none of it's really stuff that affects the overall functionality. It's more, I can't deal with how it looks. So I did run to the store, pick up extra components to get my LB for the line going into the box. You know, you saw that we had this running over and around, and we've got this little loop thing here that I don't like. So I have a feeling I'm going to end up cutting that out and just having another LB running right there and a short little piece connecting these two here, because I just don't like how it bulges out. I tried to duplicate what we did down at the end over here, but it ended up working out a lot better down there because the vertical stack is further away from the corner. But coming from the ground, you know, we do have our expansion coupler. We have a pass through right there that we can use as a pull box. Lines come up and over from the house and go into the box there. This conduit here coming over and down is going to be lines coming from a lot of the solar panels. I'll probably end up getting a sticker or something that says PV on the front or solar or something. But opening this thing up. So the right conduit right here is really everything that comes from the house, with the exception of these two PV lines here. These go to the roof arrays. I still need to make adjustments on how I'm going to route the roof arrays, or roof array right now, I guess. And then this conduit, like I said, is all the ones going out to the other arrays on the coop. So we've got our array lines coming up and routing through the top of each breaker. Each breaker comes down to the Dinkle-Din rail and then is merged with SPD. And then the combination output is down here along the bottom. I'm only currently using these two arrays right now. This one, you see I accidentally made it a little too short, so I had to use some butt splice connectors to extend it a little bit. But this one actually runs a line back up to that junction box and down, so I can disconnect the solar from the Blue Eddy, which happens to be that array on the coop roof. I can disconnect it from here and then send it into the house, so I can utilize that from the house pretty easily. I just have a set of lines down here that I can disconnect, connect right here, and then funnel into the house into one of my several charge controllers. I don't have anything coming into this fourth set right now. I do have outputs going to the house so they can be used, but nothing's going into it quite yet. I might end up just running a line from here down underground and over to this fence line so that I can split this array of 7 panels right now, because we end up getting shading on these first 1 or 2 panels earlier in the evening. And if I split this into an array of 3 and an array of 4, I can still get a lot of power even later into the day. But that's just kind of me thinking out loud right now. And then I do have an extra set of lines here that I can use for a future array out in the pasture. And so I can figure out how to rejigger some of this stuff to give me another set. Just slide everything over a little bit and give me another set of breakers and SPDs. I do have grounding from the roof array, and then this is the array. This is the ground line going into the house. I probably should put a ground line from this ground bar to this grounding stud on the box, just so that the box has a dedicated ground line to it. But there is continuity right now between the box and all of this. One thing I did not think of in the planning stages was adding the actual individual fuses, the DC fuses, before the circuit breakers. I mean, these are, yes, they're DC rated circuit breakers, but I don't know how well they would work in interrupting or tripping. I'm using them really more as just disconnects. I mean, they might work fine, I guess. I haven't had any problems with them in the past, but we've got the SPDs, but I probably should have added just those individual fuses for this, but, you know, hindsight. But overall, you know, I am pleased with it. It doesn't look too bad, other than, you know, some of the conduit things that I need to adjust still. It is nice having, you know, some flexibility out here for making changes pretty easily. Like, I know I'm going to need to switch around some of my arrays if I'm looking to put some Tygo optimizers on the coupe roof, because you can't use those optimizers with the Victron charge controllers because there's potential for conflict there. So I would have to move those to one of my other charge controllers that's not a Victron-based charge controller. But using a junction box like this gives me the ability to be able to move things around a whole lot easier. I know I've got the one inside, but you know, that's a lot smaller box. This just gives me a little more room to work. So overall, I'm pleased with it. It's been a long time coming, but you know, that's kind of how projects go, right? You know, you've got great intentions to get them done. It's just in your order of priorities, where are you at? So one question that might end up coming up is DIY versus, I don't know if you could see it, but the pre-built combiner box. What would I do? I like the flexibility of a DIY box because I can pick and choose what I'm putting into it. But that part also does, boy, allergy season, gotta love it. Cottonwood all over the place. What was I saying? Having the ability to customize and pick what you want is kind of a two-edged sword, because you have to be the one to figure out what you're going to do. I spent hours trying to figure out the layout. I already had the pieces, but to figure out the layout of this thing, where if I would have just bought something pre-built, it's already done. I mean, yeah, you have to run your lines to it, but you don't have to stop and think, how is each individual piece inside the box going to connect together, where your wire is going to flow into, all that kind of stuff. I did want to go into kind of a price comparison between a DIY and a pre-built combiner box. Obviously, everything outside of the box itself, the conduit, the wires running to the box, that's all going to be separate because you're going to incur those costs regardless. But if we take a look at the DIY one first, so this 20 by 20 by 6 enclosure that I picked up from Vivor, at the time that I purchased it, cost $113.99. Taking a look at what's inside and laying everything out, so we've got 4 Chitoxi DC 1000 volt 25 amp breakers. I got 4 of those. Each one was $15.98 a piece. We've got 4 of the SPDs up to 40,000 amps. Each one of those is $13.90 a piece. I did end up having to buy some 12-inch DIN rails, which I got a 2-pack of those for $9.99. The Dinkle DIN rails, I bought 2 sets, and each set had 8 Dinkle DIN rails, 2 grounds, 2 end caps, and 4 jumpers. Each set cost $38.99 a piece. I did have to buy a pack of ferrules, so I got a 200 pack of 10 gauge ferrules for $9.99. The bus bar that I used, I just picked up from Menards, and that was $7.50. I already had the wire on hand, But if you had to buy the wire yourself, you'd probably use a couple of feet. And I mean, when I looked at Menards, the smallest spool that I could get was a 25-footer, and that was about $20. So if we total all that up before taxes, it was around $357.95. And then for the 4-to-2 solar panel combiner box that I picked up from Watts 24/7, I ordered this back in July of last year, and the cost for that was $229 before tax and shipping. Now keep in mind these two boxes are different. The 4-to-2 combiner box is taking 4 strings, combining them into 2 strings, and then sending those 2 strings back to my house, where the DIY box that I built is taking 4 strings in and then passing those 4 strings back out. They both have surge protection ability, but it kind of gives you an idea of just the differences between building something yourself versus buying something pre-assembled. Now, I do wish that a lot of these companies that make decent quality combiner boxes just made like Junction boxes, not even a combiner. Like, I'm not doing any actual combining in here other than the SPD and the breaker. I just need a multi-point disconnect box. I know you can buy the combiner and you can split things apart and stuff like that, but it would just be nice to have, you know, a 6 or an 8 slot pass-through box that you can have disconnects and stuff in, and it's not an actual combiner. So which one would I do? I guess it kind of depends on how many lines am I trying to run through it. I mean, if I can buy the pre-built one and just separate a few pieces, then, you know, that's probably the route that I would go, because the time to figure out how I wanted things laid out, it took more time than it should have. And maybe that's just me being, you know, too nitpicky. I don't know. I guess let me know what you guys would do. Would you build one yourself, or would you buy one pre-built? I mean, it's kind of like a pre-built server rack battery versus, you know, buying your own cells and putting the battery together. I mean, each one has its place, but it kind of depends on your needs, what your use case is. So I'm just bringing you guys along for another solar project, you know, a little bit different, a little more fun than just the traditional, here's a product review, you know, back to the actual improvement projects around the property. So with that, I'm gonna let y'all go. Y'all stay safe, stay cool, and we'll catch up with you later.